Awesome.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Healthy Leader Expert Forum. Each month in the Healthy Leader Inner Circle, we do a deep dive into a core leadership theme or a skill that supports and deepens both our personal understanding of what it means to be a healthy leader and also in terms of our professional lives. And clearly, the definition of what that means shifts for each of us as we level up, as we grow, as we approach different challenges. But what is constant is the need to, and Jason and I were just talking about this, to consistently uh, ensure that we are practicing and increasing our self awareness and increasing our tools. So this month we are focused in on mastering emotional agility, which we've defined as the ability to take the experience of your thoughts and your emotions and purposefully and consciously position yourself for your best response versus a reaction. And just like in athletics, the more that you practice, the more agile you will become. So each month we have a workbook, we have exercises, we have training, we have coaching calls, and drum roll, we have the Healthy Leader Expert Forum where we bring in top notch leaders who walk the talk. And today is going to be an amazing experience because we have one of the best leaders in this industry. And so it is my privilege to introduce today's expert, Dr. Jason Jones, whose work doesn't just support emotional agility, but every aspect of what it means to be a healthy leader and truly to be the best version of yourself. So Dr. Jason Jones is an organizational psychologist. He is an executive coach, a two-time best-selling author of Activator and also 28 Days to Motivate a Team. He is a former Fortune 10 executive leader. He has coached and trained leaders across companies, listen up, IBM, American Airlines, AT&T, Microsoft, Porsche, and more, helping them to activate brain power of their people, to deepen engagement, and to elevate performance. And I'll just have to also add in that he is currently pioneering NeuroAdaptive Leadership, which we're going to talk a little bit more about. And we'll share insights from his forthcoming book and his model around that. So, just to start off, I wanted to say I know that that is not all of who you are, Jason, but I wanted to say a very heartfelt welcome to our forum.
Thank you very much, Tracy. It's great to be here with you.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's start simple. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey, and what inspired you to write these two amazing books.
Yeah, well, how far to go back here? Um, early on in my career, I did own a business, and I was also thinking that I wanted to do counseling work. And so I was working on a master's degree in counseling psychology. I owned a computer training business, and it was a franchise. And I saw real quickly that I loved business, and I loved the idea of growing a team and growing an organization. And I also love psychology. I love human behavior. But I quickly learned that I wasn't cut out for the counseling, getting people from, deficit up to par, getting people from dysfunction to function. But I really had a love for getting people from good to great, from, average to extraordinary. And so that led me into working on a PhD in the area of industrial organizational psychology and better understanding motivation and engagement, performance, and those sorts of things. And then after that, I sold that business and said I need to get corporate experience, and that landed me in the training and development world. For a number of years, so for about 12, 13 years. And while I was doing that, the company I was with got purchased by AT&T, which is a whole nother story about change and everyone around you. I laid off. I had 8 employees. I laid all of them off, even myself. And I sat through my own layoffs. And then right at the end, before it all kind of transpired, they offered me and another one of my employees a job. And so I went through extreme change in that and loss. and then went from a company of 5,000 to a company of 200,000 people worldwide. And but it ended up being a good thing for me, and I learned so much because I said, "Hey, let's figure out how they do this training and development of people around the world. At least I can go and see what they do, and then if I don't like it, then maybe find something else." And I really, took a hold of that and began to work throughout the organization and helping develop leaders, mainly helping them build their teams. And that's what led to my first book because I had so many people calling me saying, I'm doing a team meeting. I need to get my team together. We're fragmented. We're not on the same page. I have one good performer and the rest of them are just average. How do I do this where we can get people motivated and engaged and performing at a better level. And so that first book was really written from a standpoint of taking a lot of blog posts and a lot of work I'd already done, a lot of consulting and coaching work I've already done internal at AT&T, and saying, hey, here's kind of a method, a 4-week process for getting your team ready to have a new outlook and getting on the same page and really lighting a fire underneath them. And so that's kind of that's the 28 days idea. It's the 4 weeks
Mm-hmm.
to transform your team. After getting a PhD and all that, I also began to study neuroscience. And my PhD was heavy on behavioral science. And those of you who kind of have a background in that, you kind of understand, probably know what I'm talking about there, that it's all about and it fits business really well because it's all about the doing. We don't think too much about the emotion. We don't think too much about all the other things, the background, the history. It's all about the behavior and how do we force it? How do we motivate it? And then how do we get what we want from other people?
Right.
There's a lot of good stuff there. A lot of things that are good with research and whatnot. However, we're not animals. We can't just reward and punish and threaten to get the things we want and then reinforce to get it to happen more often. We're more complex than that. And I was seeing the emergence of neuroscience, and this is in the late 2000s, as being fascinating and actually showing some insights that we had been missing in industrial organizational psychology, being so behavioral oriented. And so I
Mm-hmm.
began to merge the two. And that's what kind of led to the idea of activator, because activator basically is how you as a leader can light the brain up of the people that you lead. And when you light their brain up in multiple areas, they automatically become more self-directed, more motivated. They have greater well-being. They want to give their best in work and in life. And you're being the type of leader that actually brings out the best in them and the best in yourself. I always like to say, no one can reach the highest level of your potential or your achievement without the help of others.
Love
And
that.
at the same time, you can't reach that highest level unless you're helping other people to do the same thing.
That's
What an
powerful.
amazing human cycle that is.
As you give, you receive.
That's right. And so all of Activator is really about how do we as leaders light the brain up of our people so it brings out the best in who they are to give their best. And so that whole book is really about the three daily practices that are neuroscience based that you can use to really light up the brain of other people. And so that's what I've spent the last 15 years really studying, writing, speaking about, even coaching people around it, my executive coaching work. And then over the last couple of years, I've really moved into what I see as a kind of a gap in leadership, and that is more of the inner work of a leader to be the best and to be able to receive and to achieve the outer results, the outer leadership that you need to have. It has to begin with the inner work. And that's the concept of neuroadaptive leadership. I'm currently writing a book on that right now. And that really is about how do we prepare our nervous system? How do we prepare our brain, our mind, and our bodies, our mindsets to be the best leader we can, even in the midst of chaos and disruption? And of course, we're all thinking about AI, which is bringing a lot of that.
Right. Oh my gosh, there's so many strings that I could pull from what you just said. That was brilliant in many ways. I'm going to rewind all the way to the beginning because you used a phrase. You said they were asking me how to be motivated and engaged, which takes me to one of the first things that I love about chapter 2 when you talk about what really motivates. And
Hmm.
you make a point, I think, that most people miss, which is that motivation isn't really the same as engagement. So can you talk
Hmm.
a little bit to that?
Yeah, yeah. So a way to kind of think about this is that motivation is like the your hand inside a glove. So the engagement's the external, what's happening. Motivation's the internal, it's the fuel, it's the driver. Maybe you can call it the engine if you want to of it. But people can be motivated and not engaged. I talk in my book, in my activator book, about an employee I had, highly motivated, highly talented, and I failed in terms of making sure he got engaged. And it caused problems and he eventually left. And
Mhm.
this was a person that had all the motivation. It's just me as a leader didn't do some of the things I could have done to engage him in the work because engagement is where you are 100% giving this discretionary effort to towards the overarching goals of the individual, but also the team, right? And then motivation is psychological energy. That is the idea. That is what makes me want to move and want to do different or do something different. So they're two separate things, but I like to say you can be motivated and not engaged, but you can't be engaged and not motivated.
I read that in your book, and I thought that the story that you gave, I don't know if you're giving yourself enough credit because the gentleman that you were talking about really was motivated to start his own business, right?
That's right.
To
Yep.
be an entrepreneur.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And but there's some things as a leader, if I would have been more in tune with that, I could have helped him help guide that a little bit more to benefit my team and benefit the team and maybe a better win-win than being caught off guard by number one, other colleagues saying he's disengaged and not helping us, and number two, me being caught off guard when he says, I'm quitting. I'm out of here. Right?
Yeah. So let me ask you a question that popped into my head when I read that is that what you just named how you could have done something differently, but what would that actually have looked like?
I think for me, I like to say that, the activation, and when you boil it down, it's about intentional interactions and experiences with people. That's how we light them up. And people are different. So we have to know them, really get to know them and talk about how we connect with them, get to know what their aspirations are, their goals, their values. And then what we're trying to do is align those. I talk a lot about this in the book is how do we get to know what those motives and desires are, and then how do we align that with their work? And here's the thing is that it's not overly complicated. And when you start having good connective conversations, people connect the dots. You connect the dots together and then you can start then putting them into positions. I wish I would have given him more responsibility. He was younger. He was a young guy. I probably didn't trust him as much as I should have trusted him
Mm-hmm.
and maybe put him or given him some more maybe entrepreneurial, innovative leeway in the work that he was doing. And he happened to be one of the guys that did a lot of the tech stuff for us anyway. And in hindsight, it was a miss on my part.
Mm-hmm. I think that that's very, very powerful because the way that you've just redefined win-win, I think oftentimes we think that a win-win means that I win because you're doing what I want you to do, and you're winning because you're moving up in this job that I want you to have. But really, it's a win-win in that maybe if you had given him a different type of job, that those skills then would have supported him when he was going to eventually go off and be an entrepreneur anyway. So it's a win-win, even if it's
Yeah.
not just within your own cosmic environment here that it's just winning for people in general, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
absolutely. And that's one of my grounding values. I believe things happen the way that they need to happen or are supposed to happen. I'm just
Mhm.
going to do my best to help, you know, bring out the best in people with where they're at the time.
Yeah, that's it's interesting because I just this past weekend was doing some leadership work with a company, and we were talking about the concept of unconditional positive regard and whether somebody wants to, and you can apply it in this situation. So
Hmm.
positive regard for him that he doesn't want to work for you guys necessarily, but there are skills that you can use in this instance and support
Yeah.
people knowing that everybody has their own individual
Hmm.
way and to understand that it's not just about what is right in front of us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
The other thing that you brought up is you kind of glossed over the driver aspect, and I think that it would be great to just go over the three drivers. I think that's fairly fundamental with maybe a little bit of a a focus on the purpose driver. If you could give us a quick definition of your of the three purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, we have different types of drivers for motivation and whatnot. And, we certainly have, and you can think of from the very beginning of mankind that we've learned how to deal with each other. We learn to get what we want from each other. And, one of these drivers is basically the threat and telling people this is what we want. You do what I tell you to do, or there's going to be a problem here. We're going to end your job. We're going to, a long time ago, and it's still around.
Mm-hmm.
We will harm you, or you will be hurt, or your family, or whatnot. It's sad, but to humankind has used that, unfortunately, to get people to do what we want them to do and to motivate people. And then the second lever of this is reward and incentive. And that is, okay, if you do what I want you to do, I'm going to reward you for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that works, but it's typically short term because we satiate as people. Reward works, for a little bit, but then it stops working because we're not valuing it as much. We've achieved it, and that's one thing that's different with our brain than an animal's brain, right? Is we will often use the same type of approach to motivation in terms of rewards and incentives, and then we wonder why they lose power. Well, because we're different. We're not a dog. We're not a chimpanzee, right? We have this valuing system in our prefrontal executive lobe that says, hey, what does this really mean? Are they manipulating me? Oh, you know what? I got that raise. I got that $5,000 raise, but guess what? That was 9 months ago, and I'm worth so much more than that right now. You
Right.
know, and then it's not motivating anymore. And so it becomes chasing your tail in many ways for leaders to just use incentive and reward. And then this third lever is really around kind of the passion and purpose of people. And I really put it more in purpose, but oftentimes you see passion where there's purpose. And
Mm-hmm.
this is what really connects with that executive prefrontal cortex of ours. That is where our true human uniqueness is, of making good decisions, of putting our extra effort into something, of being highly passionate and being purposeful and being connected with others, is from there. And so that's why when I talk about, helping, how do you help people to become motivated? One of the most important things we do is knowing that we need to help connect people with what those values and that purposes that they have. And when we help connect their work with that, then they're going to be much more self motivated and self directed, more engaged.
Powerful words. And the thing that stands out to me when you are talking about that is the idea of actual connection, which is, I think of connection, I think of as an emotional connection. And one of the exercises that we have used is when you have maybe a lack of connection or the connection isn't as high as you'd like it to be in a personal or even in a professional setting, is to find some common ground, even if it's we cheer for the same team or
Hmm.
we drive
Hmm.
the same route to work. Do you have, I feel like there was something in this book, I can't find it right now, that there was that you have lots of great ideas on how to also create that connection so that it is tactical so people can practice creating
Hmm.
connection. Do you have some other ideas about how we could do that?
Yeah, and in my activator book, I talk about a lot about connection. It is the one of the key and daily practices that I talk about, because your connection is not just a relationship. Your connection, think of it as in strength. The stronger your connection, the better you're going to be able to coach. Imagine, so think about this. If you have a strong connection with someone, that means you have stronger trust with them. That allows you to then give them more constructive feedback, and they understand this isn't about you coming down on them or being in a bad mood. This is about you, they believe that you want to help them get better. Think about your best coach, right? So
Mhm.
connection, the relationship, the trust is so very important to that. It also, I say, it earns you the right to give constructive feedback, to challenge people and push them towards something they may not want to do without them throwing up the defense walls. Um, it's also one of those things too, that whenever you build that connection, people will follow you because they trust you even when they disagree with you.
So powerful.
And a lot of leaders don't have that. A lot of leaders have never reached that. And it all starts with your connection, the strength of your connection. Now, some people say, oh, I have a connection with my employees, I have a relationship with them, but it's surface. And so I think the first thing, kind of the light connection begins with, and that is just getting to know people, respecting them, giving them dignity, and getting to know who they are as a person, not just someone who works for you and creates and gets a result for you. We all want to know that we're valued for more than just what we do for somebody, right? We want to know we're valued for who we are. So get to know them as a mother, as a father, as a child, as a aunt and uncle, as a what they do in their life outside of work, and find those commonalities. Yes, that's helpful. And then there's just normal relational behaviors we do, like listen well, smile,
Hmm.
ask questions rather than always telling someone what to do. And then you got another level, which I believe is around values alignment. And that is where you're getting to know someone in terms of what their values are, what's important to them, what drives them. This is why in my book I talk about the motives and values quiz that I have that I provide on my websites. It's a free assessment that allows you to better understand what are the of the 16 motivators and drivers. These are intrinsic values. What are the strongest of people? And then how you can then find connections. You can help align them with their work, and then you can also have conversations around this, because these are the things that really it makes who they are as a person.
Hmm.
So those things I can't go into it because of time in terms of um, all of what that entails. But in the book, you can read all about this and how to do this better. But that gives you your stronger connection.
Yeah, and at the end of this, we'll also give your website out, and people will be able to find you to be able to do that as well. I cannot remember where you said you got those 16 drivers from, and I didn't get a chance to look at them, but I thought it was really interesting how you integrated
Yeah.
it into your
Yeah,
work.
it's based on it's based on the work of Dr. Stephen Reese out of the Ohio State University and his research team. And they did a global study
Right.
looking at what are the global drivers of humans across all things, not just to work, but in life. And
Hmm.
after factor analysis, they came down to 16 of them. And what's significant about it is the fact that this wasn't just research done in the Western world. It wasn't done just Canada, United States, and it wasn't done where a lot of research is done, which is in a middle to upper class suburb of or a city that is uh, with professionals, or in a predominantly majority or white middle
Hmm.
class outside of a college university, or around a college university. So much psychological research is done with those groups, and makes it very difficult to generalize across all of humankind. And Reese and his staff, his group, did this across the world in multiple continents. So now you're seeing people who are, whether they're poor, they're rich, or they are, African or Asian, or they're Canadian, or they're Brazilian, whatever it might be. Now you're getting a better look at what deeply is rooted into who we are and what's wired into our brain as some consistent drivers of motivation. And by the way, when I say motivation, also, and people know my work, and as I try to train people, I want them to understand motivation isn't just another word, or motivations, what our motives are just another word for our intrinsic values. What's
I
deep
love it.
inside us that we intrinsically, it doesn't matter if someone's rewarding us around it or telling us we're good. It is deeply fulfilling these things, or things that we need, or these desires and values we have internal. Those are the things that truly drive our behavior. And by the way, you say, what about money? You know, what about, accolades? What about all these? Guess what? Those typically are just vehicles to get us to the deeper internal drivers.
Right, right. You
And
know,
when you and I talk about and speak about well-being, um, uh, you want that, well-being, one of the greatest things we can do is understand and align what are our intrinsic values, and then seek to fulfill those in our lives at work and outside of work. And that helps drive greater well-being for us.
I love it. That's exactly what we are studying here, and that's exactly what one of the very first steps when we go through the exterior model is we start with the vision, and what are your what do you envision, your life looking like in your private, personal, and professional? Private being just you by yourself looking in the mirror, or if you have a relationship with God. Personal is, people who are closer to you, maybe family, maybe coworkers, and then professional is outside of that. And to be able
Yeah.
to understand that even across those relationships, maybe there are different um, emphasis, and I think you say this in the book, at different times for different values or across different relationships. But regardless of what it is, it's inherently, as you said, something that is meaningful to you, that is internal, that you don't have to make it up. You don't have to like
Yeah.
say, "Come on, let's go."
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the thing is some of our values, intrinsic values, are genetic. They're wired into us at birth. Some of it is shaped in us, and that is, how can we grew up, what we were exposed to that shaped our values, and what's more intrinsic to us. And as Stephen Reese would say, do these things, people would ask him, do these things change? And in the research you see, do they change? And they're what we call relatively stable in
Mm-hmm.
that these things usually by adulthood, by late teens to early 20s, they solidify and they stay pretty stable throughout life. However, um, we have multiple things, so they jockey these motives and these internal values. They may jockey for priority throughout our
Mm-hmm.
lives. So, for instance, you may have a strong desire to raise children and spend time with your children, but you also may have a strong desire for power, which that is, it's not a bad thing. This is about how you want to influence, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that might drive you to want to have a job where you could have influence, but also you might want to raise your kids. And for many people, that becomes the two values that kind of jockey for priority. So that's one thing we have to think about, and it's up to each of us to know how do we manage that and do it in a way that we can do it in a way we feel good about it. The other piece of it is that those usually don't change, but by time of life they change. So maybe in someone who has younger kids, that might have a more of a priority than when their kids are raised, right? Then that maybe family value has less of it because their life is different. The demands of life are different. And then someone would ask, well, does something change really drastically? And his explanation of this was that the only time they really change drastically is if you have a drastic change
Mm-hmm.
of value system, usually based on a major life experience that would change your value system significantly.
And that sounds very similar to what they teach in terms of Gallup strengths and what your strengths generally are. And the one thing that makes me just a little itchy around that is that I think very often if I'm working with somebody who is feeling resentful towards a family member or towards a colleague, and I'm trying to think of, maybe their value is curiosity and the other person doesn't have it, and they're always butting heads, that there's, if there's an awareness around that, then to say, what else do you value that could help you change your brain around the way that you're interacting with that person? So it may not be a shift in values necessarily, but
Hmm.
how do you use a different strength to change the way that you're showing up in the world? And we do have, I mean, you're going to speak a lot about this,
Yeah.
the ability to do that,
Yeah.
even if we've had experiences to the contrary.
Yeah, yeah, and here's the thing is, and that's why it's good to know these things, especially in relationships, because when we have differing value systems, even when things like curiosity, or what if they're about acceptance or level of acceptance, or they're about power, or they're about status, these are all intrinsic desires or values. If I'm a strong in one and I have a colleague or I have a spouse that is or a family member that is opposite, we actually see things very differently. And
Mhm.
then we can actually then say, well, why aren't you seeing this the way I'm seeing it? I don't understand why you can't see it. And it's because it is more intrinsic in terms of their makeup. One of them is this idea of honor or expedience. This is a really unique one because what they found in the research is that there are about half the population is more what we call more expedient and less what they use the word honor, but it's also known as expedience. And that is the stronger you are in honor, the more you like to abide by the rules, that you go by the expectations that are set for you. The weaker you're in it, the more you are more rebellious. You want to you want to find your own way. You want to, walk by your own drum beat, right? And and so imagine someone who's strong on honor, who is, you go by the rules, you do what the boss says, you do what we're supposed to be doing here. And then you got someone on total opposite who is more rebellious. You could look at them and go, "What's wrong with you? Why are you like this?" Or vice versa. That person could look at you and go, "You are such a stick in the mud. Like, have some flexibility in your life. Come on, you're boring." And and we can actually make each other even like evil in
Right.
that. But when you look at the other person and you better understand, oh, then you know how to vent that. So I have
Mm,
an employee on my team that's one of these that's maybe a little harder to get along with, because they have a low acceptance, meaning that they don't care about it, whether people like them or accept them.
mhm,
And they have high or low honor, or
mhm.
they're weak in honor. That means they're going to be like very much like a Steve Jobs.
Right.
So you can look at that and go, that's a terrible employee. This person is not helpful. They dissent on things. They seem to have a hard time. They don't care about how they show up, or they're not conscientious about things. Or we can look at them and go, okay, this is their intrinsic values. How do I help guide that towards the work? And then maybe we make that person say, hey, be our devil's advocate here. Help us see this. But here's some ways to do that better. Coach them. This is how you can do this better, so that you're not just so, strong in that area, and then you're putting people off, right? And then, so maybe that person is going to find things that are more innovative. They can see things differently than we can, right? And then you can also help those who are strong on the other side to understand that person, and then we're able to get along a little bit better. This is really good even in your personal relationships, especially with your kids,
Mm,
spouse.
mhm,
Better understanding why you might have certain conflicts because you have differing intrinsic values on those things. How about social contact?
mm.
How many relationships is one strong and one's weak? And that becomes kind of a conflict.
Mhm.
And you got to look at it from the different sides and say, how do we work together on this and we both get what we need from this to be able to fulfill ourselves in this way?
Whew, that's powerful too. And it's interesting because it's making me think of the idea that if we can see beyond, the external impression or the judgment that we have, and apply some discernment of what are their values and where that's coming from. And then the ability, we say that, oh, if we could do so, but if we could just do that, then that would help solve the problem.
Hmm.
And the ability to do that, to go from a mental arm cross about you are over there and I'm over here, feels like we have to be able to do that first, to be able to kind of be willing to say, all right,
Right.
let me look at their values. And so that might be a segue, possibly. I was just about to try to raise your new book, NeuroAdaptive Leadership, but that might be a segue into neuroadaptive leadership and how things are changing so quickly and how different people are different, and maybe it's not. Can you speak to the idea of when you come up against, or you're working with somebody and you share these ideas with them, and then they don't land, or you see this, like how do we undo that?
Hmm. Yeah. So help me understand your question a little bit more. Is you're trying to persuade them, you're trying to get them on your side, or is this how you internally are managing the situation so you can make the right decisions? What is your thoughts on that
Yeah, so
approach?
let me give you an example. The example is that I know that I'm having a challenge with this person, and you know what? I'll just go straight to it. It's even political, right? Is
Hmm.
what's going on in the United States right now. There's a huge
Hmm.
divide in politics, and if we
Hmm.
have one individual, it doesn't matter what side they're on, and they have their arms crossed about like I'm right, you're wrong, and we say to them, hey, listen, let's see what we do value together, and let's go through this
Right.
process, that there
Hmm.
needs to be a willingness to do that. And is there a trick, or a way to help people do that? And maybe it's by asking them their values first, or
Yeah.
to kind of loosen that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so this is a big question. It could be a long explanation, and because I
Sorry.
think there's I know I think there's a lot of I think there's multiple factors here,
Hmm.
and even just getting down to is a person willing to listen to you, and
willing.
even consider your perspective is going to be, that's a deeper question based on who you are, your credibility, your relationship, how much they trust you, all those sorts of things. It also is on their part in terms of how open they are, how attuned they are, how willingness, how deep their bias is ingrained and entrenched into their perspective, their level of conscientiousness. There's so many factors that are a part of this, and this was what makes human behavior not only intriguing but very frustrating as well.
Well
Right?
said.
But it's kind of the short part of your question, depending on that person and knowing that person, if I know their values, I'm going to try to respond in alignment with those values. And so I may say something to the effect of, I understand and see that this value is very important to you, and that is why you have this perspective. Let me tell you about my value and why I believe it's driving my perspective. And then
Mhm.
you're having a conversation about your differing values that not necessarily makes one person a better person than the other, but you're showing that the perspective of it as being, this is how and why I think this way. What you're trying to do in that is you're trying to get them to see a different perspective, a different vantage point, and perhaps decode to some extent themselves in the midst of it. Okay.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I'm trying to think of an example that is not political, that would be more uh, maybe business oriented or work oriented. And so maybe someone on the team just doesn't seem to want to be very collaborative. They seem to be defensive,
Mhm.
and they believe that's how you get work done and get business done.
Mhm.
And they believe, hey, we don't need to have any emotion here. We don't need to, we just come and do our job. You don't have to be all fluffy and touchy
Mhm.
feely with everybody. Come do your job, get your job done, and leave. And
Mhm.
and you may have a very different perspective. Hey, we want to collaborate so we're a better team and stuff like that. Well, that's where you might have that conversation and say, hey, you know what? I can see where you come from in that your past jobs or your bosses that you've had in the past, maybe you know a little bit about that, have all been about nose to the grindstone, get it done, and then you could have even been punished. And really work is about getting the work done. Um, from my vantage point, my values, I see that there are more better ways or alternative ways to work on this. One of them is being more collaborative. And here's what I've seen and what I've experienced in that. And so you're kind of contrasting values with experience and even some empathy and understanding
Sure.
with that. And I don't know if that is a great example because I haven't really had a chance to kind of think through that, but maybe it gives some idea of how we might have that interaction that brings in the values and then help someone decode. By the way, I've mentioned the decode, which is an element of my adapt model
Mhm.
for neuroadaptive leadership. And the D is decoding our thought patterns. And this is where we're taking time to reflect, or we're prompting people as leaders, we can prompt people to reflect on our thinking, which means we don't approach people with you. It may be we're approaching them with some questions that create some insights for both of you.
I love that. So we'll dive into NAL here in a second. I want to say what I thought was very interesting is you answered that question probably three different times. The final time with a beautiful example of how it would look, and what you basically started with is let me go out to that person and let me understand their values. I see where you're coming from, and then I understand that maybe in your past, like so. We use a tool called Out In Together for communication, which is to literally go out, get out of your shoes, and to step into the other person's shoes. And of course you have to be willing to do that
Yeah.
in order to begin to see that perspective. It also reminds me of the African saying sawubona, which is I see you. I see
Mm,
you. And if people
yeah,
are seen, maybe that'll kind of then they really
absolutely.
get it.
Yeah, and I think one of the top ways to respect someone and one of the highest needs that we have is respect, but it is to be heard, it's to be seen. Yeah.
Yeah, so take
And
a
that lowers the walls for many people of defensiveness.
I, yeah, I think it's important to double underline that because I do personally believe we have our fifth model that is about when you get into this point where you're feeling arm crossed, that if you really can widen your perspective, whether it's with another person or how you're thinking about your own
Hmm.
past. Like the
Hmm.
ability to do that, I feel like is one of the most important
Yeah,
skills to be able to do that.
absolutely.
So maybe you might be able to use neuroadaptive leadership to do that. So tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about this, and I'd love to get into your model as well.
Yeah. Well, I would say this, as a neuroadaptive leader, you're going to be more prepared to be able to have those conversations because this is the inner work of being able to manage uh, you know, chaos, uncertainty, ambiguity, any type of disruption, and even arguments and change that's happening or people that don't agree with you in the moment. Being more neuroadaptive will help you with that. And neuroadaptive leadership really is the inner work for being able to lead through change and disruption. And I
Mm,
believe that is something that is really going to be an important thing for all leaders, an important skill set for all leaders moving into the future, even now. We have so much going on with AI. We have, the context of leadership now is moving from managing systems and managing people and hiring and getting people geared towards a mission or organizational goals and vision. We're now moving into a context of um, uh, rapid and continually advancing technology
mm-hmm.
that is reshaping the workforce and the workplace at a far greater pace than it ever has before. 70% of executives, according to KPMG, just recently, just earlier this year, said 70% said they're seeing change that is unprecedented in their entire careers. And so this is far beyond what we even saw with some of the things related to, even the internet, when the internet or desktops and computers. And so we've got to prepare ourselves. The context doesn't just include the technological change and whatnot. It now includes emotional upheaval that we're having to deal with decision making in different ways, and what decisions now are the context of decisions, which used to be much more related to certainty and confidence. Now, many leaders are pretty open about the fact that they're having to make judgment calls in the midst of uncertainty and ambiguity about the future. Think about how many people are making decisions, how many executive leaders have had to make decisions over the last few months for their business based on trying to understand what's going on in terms of tariffs, taxation, the workforce, other investments, right? And so it is much more emotionally volatile, and decision making is becoming much more difficult. And all of this, the idea of the neuroadaptive leader is how do we evolve to be able to manage this well, the inner work to be able to manage it and be adaptive to whatever comes our way on it. And so I have a model that I use to actually help us build that. It is a neuroscience-based, research-based model that is kind of a step-by-step process for how do we become more neuroadaptive and we're able to better manage this for ourselves. That way we get the results that we want.
Yeah, let's hear it. Let's go through it. I'm excited. I hope we can get through all of it.
Yeah, yeah. And so one of the things I would say too is, neuroadaptive leader, what does that person look like? Well, they adapt as fast as their environment and they're out in front of it. And therefore, with that, they're not afraid of it. Okay. They manage the emotional piece of for themselves so that it doesn't affect the way that they lead other people. We all know that when we are emotionally high strung, when we're hijacked, our lizard brain hijacks us. We're not good with relationships. We're not good with decision making. We're not good with creativity. And so we want to make sure we're better at that. Imagine a special forces um, officer or agent going into, maybe a Navy SEAL goes into a mission and they haven't been trained to manage high levels of stress, being shot at, possibly dying, actually having a mission that they have a role in, that they have to keep their brain on focus for because it means other people's lives are on the line. Imagine them not being trained for that.
Right.
Imagine you're just throw them out there and then see how they react. How many of them would freeze up or go off mission, right? So part of that, what they do is train them to be neuroadaptive, to be able to make sure that they're not freaking out or their brain, their lizard brain isn't taking over their executive brain, so that in the midst of the situation, they can be on mission and make the right decisions and interact and communicate effectively, right? That's what neuroadaptive leadership is in the business world, basically. And
Hmm.
so we evolve more mental toughness and resiliency in this, and
Hmm.
we actually can learn faster. We are able to foster psychological safety with people that are around them, and then we're able to better make decisions that are ethical and that are mission aligned, right? So that's kind of a way of looking at it. Probably use way more words than I needed to on that, but I have a model that I use that I call it's the ADAPT model. And
Hmm.
this ADAPT model, each of the letters is an acronym. And so the A stands for tuning to the disruption. And this is basically telling our brain, getting accustomed to, we know that there is change and there is disruption coming. And these are micro, some of them are daily. You know, you get interrupted, you get an email from your boss that's not happy with you. A kid gets sick, right? Um, it is knowing it's going to come here. The macro ones are the bigger ones. There's a restructuring. Maybe you're losing your job. Maybe you find out you have a health issue. Those are the macro ones. And attuning means that on a daily basis, even in the midst of it, in the morning we wake up going, you know what? Change will probably happen today. And I'm going to be aware of it, and I'm going to know it's coming, and I'm going to actually utilize it for good, no matter what it is. And even if it's catastrophic, I'm going to be a person that handles this in stride with calm and with curiosity and with openness. And so that's the attunement piece that leads us to the next one, which is the D, which is decoding the thought patterns. Now, this is where you're actually looking at and going, now, how am I thinking about this and reacting to it? What is my thought saying? Am I utilizing these thought patterns in a way that's hindering me and working against me? Am I more negative about this? Am I jumping to conclusions? Am I using a great deal of bias here? Am I using assumptions more than I should about, oh, this is going to be terrible when maybe it's not going to be, right?
Right.
We know that most of the things we worry about don't actually end up happening
Right.
because our brain is kind of geared that way,
Right.
right? So the decoding allows us to be able to stop and say, reflect, what am I thinking? Is this serving me? Reframe that, and then
Hmm.
begin to work into, now how do I do things differently? The A is for align your intent and identity. And this is, you're aligning that with what your leadership, what you're trying to do. This is, yes, this could be having a leadership mission, why you are a leader, and being clear on that. But it goes even deeper than that. This is what you're telling yourself on a daily basis of, I'm a leader that does this. So daily you are feeding and you're priming yourself with, this is the type of leader that I am based on what's going on right now. So creating these I am statements of saying, I am a leader that is mission driven. I'm a leader that brings out the best in my people. I'm a leader that says, these I am statements can be really helpful for that. And so that's the alignment. And then we have, and by the way, there's so many really cool brain interactions that are happening where you get dual activation in your brain between your prefrontal cortex and your default mode system of your brain, which is your creativity and your visioning and your ideas. And when those things dual activate, it's a superpower in terms of how your brain is working.
Well, I just have to interrupt you for a second because I'm like jumping out of my skin because this is the work of being a healthy leader and doing that on the daily. And you and I were talking beforehand about my own process in the morning, what I do, and all the people who are in the healthy leader inner circle, their vision statements in private, personal, and professional start with I am. And remembering that on a daily, you think, oh, that's silly. I don't need to remember who I am. Yeah, there's so much going on out here.
It is, and there's so much research around how we prime and the language and the words that we use for ourselves. Um, Woodbrooks at Harvard, her research is amazing around this, of just changing words out from anxious to excited. It impacts performance at a high level. Anything from mathematics, there we go. Anything from mathematics all the way to work performance, and karaoke. That's one area, all kinds of performance. But yeah, it's good stuff. The last two, I'll get to those real quickly, and then feel free to ask me about any type of strategies around that, because I'd love to share some strategies. But the P stands for programming adaptivity. This is where now you are wiring your brain to be, this neuroadaptive. You're ready to leverage the change in chaos and anything that's happening around you. You're ready to leverage it and jump on it. And so that piece there is about how we actually rewire our brain. And then finally, the last piece is transfer through culture. And while this isn't all of going out and doing, it is some of the modeling, but it's with the idea here that the stronger we have people around it, the more neuroadaptive we have people around us that we work with, it actually helps our neuroadaptiveness. Our brains align, our brain waves literally align. Neuroscience shows this. If you're a leader, you walk in the room or you have a multiple number of people that are in the room and they have certain waves like delta waves, things like that, I can lower and bring the mood, the tone, the emotion of the room down, or it can bring it up. It can be more creative. And so how we interact and what we do with our team actually supports us and raises us, or it actually can bring us down. And so that whole area that transfer through your culture is about how do we all become better together, and it becomes a shared skill and a shared advantage for the team.
That is really cool. We call that neurochemical bartending.
Yeah, I like it. I like it.
Yeah. So how about if I'm going to ask, we've got a couple of questions out here that maybe you can answer them in reference to your adapt model, or just in any way that you would like to. So someone has asked, where do leaders most often stall in the adapt, and why?
Mm. Um, each of these, I think what you'll find, I'm working on an assessment for this right now. Each of these, you can have strength or weakness in these things. However, the way that I've kind of built and structured this is when I'm coaching with people, we kind of start with the attune to disruption. We start learning how to help our brain and having the mindset around. Let's like it's like a climber, a mountain climber. Imagine a mountain climber wakes up and they're at like base camp 5 and they want to go to base camp 10, and they wake up and they go, you know what? I really am not feeling like I want to climb today. I don't want to climb today. Oh, this looks pretty good here. That's not being adaptive to what's going on. The real climbers have the mindset of, let's go. It's 6 a.m. or it's 5:30 a.m. I can't wait to get to that next stop,
Right.
and it's going to be hard and it's going to be a lot of work. I'm going to be tired when I get there, but man, that's the goal, and I am ready for it. I'm ready for the difficulties that are lie ahead of me because of the outcomes, right? That's kind of the mindset, the attunement we have of wherever I'm ready for it. Come on, bring it on, and then we do it. So I say that to say that's the beginning point. And what I find is the barrier, and people talk about this in training, but in executive coaching, I find this all the time. Leaders are so busy.
Hmm.
Leaders doing a lot, and they have a lot of stress, a lot of pressures. The one thing that they seem to not do very well is stop. Stop and reflect and to process. It's kind of like, leaders are like these Formula One race cars. And you can go take one of those things and they are high performance. But guess what? If you drive them around and drive them and you don't stop for a pit stop, if you don't take a break with it, you don't refuel, you don't change the tires, you don't fix the things that go wrong here and there, guess what happens? That Formula One car will end up breaking down, or it will cease to be at the level of the other Formula One cars that are taking the breaks and taking the pit stops. So, the number one thing that I will often tell leaders is your number one tactic to be a high performing leader is to learn and know and give yourself permission to stop and reflect and to think about where you are, where you want to go, how you're thinking about things, and then how you align with the outcomes that you truly want.
And what would be some examples of how leaders could do that?
Well, one I like first thing in the morning, take your 5 minutes. Your 5 minutes, I call it alignment and attention and intention, because that is what do I need to do today that reaches my goals, and then what intention am I setting for how I'm doing that and how I need to interact with my people. It didn't take that long. But it is, and I also think reflection at the end of the day. Set
Mm.
a time for that reflection at the end of the day. How am I doing that? And you know what? If you need to, set alarm on your clock to remind you, or on your phone to remind you. A lot of people can do this in their car, right? When they're in traffic and whatnot. Now, probably not great to do it if you're really highly frustrated or highly stressed out,
Right.
but find that time that you can do that, and I think it's a good start with it.
Well, it's almost like I planted you to answer that. There's a lot of the stuff that we're doing here in terms of creating space. Are you doing it at the beginning of the day? Are you doing it at the end of
Mhm.
the day? Are you setting your timers in the middle of the day? And eventually, for me, what it feels like as I practice this is that if I get that morning time, which is really informed by how I ended my evening before,
Mhm.
if I get that morning time, and then if I actually set my alarm goes off every hour for me to do just a mini, reset, to remember
Mhm.
what's important and to kind of pull myself away from my work. Now, I don't do that every hour on the hour, but I feel like
Yeah.
the more you're able to do that, then it becomes more of like who you become. It becomes that
Yeah.
unconscious competence.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think from just as your standpoint of well-being
Mm.
and even wellness, having your break during the day. There's a reason why we have a lunch break. Some of this stuff is rooted way back in the old research around stress and performance. And they take, line workers, their performance is terrible if they work for more than about 4 hours, right? And so you look at that. So imagine what it's like for your brain and for those who are making high level, you know, decisions that are very important to the work. We need that brain break. And so I teach leaders that I work with and coach that we need that break and how to have that break during the day, and how to have that lunch break or that mental wellness break that you need to have that actually gives you more energy to be better in the rest of the day. There's a reason why the research shows that we make poor decisions and more unethical decisions in the afternoon. There's a reason why surgeons make more mistakes and more malpractice issues when they do surgery in the afternoon.
Hmm.
And it's because we lack a lot of things in the afternoon that because of fatigue, and we have to learn to manage that. We haven't taken our breaks. We haven't done the things to manage that well, good enough. And when we do, it actually gives you that extra kick and fire to be your best during the afternoon.
Well, so that's a great segue to my final question for you, which is what do you personally do, either in terms of breaks or your mental, emotional, physical? What's a key takeaway for you in terms of, if you don't mind sharing, what you
Yeah.
do to make sure that you maintain your health mentally, emotionally, and physically, your brain health as well?
Yeah. So there's a lot of different things I think I would say that I do. If I were to kind of narrow them down to the top, like three,
Mhm.
I'd say number one is sleep. I would tell people sleep like a pro, become an expert at your sleep. And your sleep is not going to be the same as someone else's sleep, likely. You might need more or less, but I use a Oura Ring sleep tracker to know how much deep sleep I'm getting. I know how much I wake up in the middle of the night. Become a professional. If you want to be a high performing professional and be your best in work and life, your sleep is where it begins. Okay. So that is the number one thing also for your longevity, for your health, for repairing your body, for all those different things. Second thing I would say is taking time daily for reflection and gratefulness. And that lights up a part of the prefrontal cortex, gratefulness. The more you do it, even if you force it, the more your brain becomes sensitive to it. It lights up easier, and you begin to see the world from a gratefulness perspective.
Which is huge.
So, which is big, and there's so much research on this on lower depression, lower anxiety, better feeling about life. You like your people in your life better. You like your work better. There's just so much there. And I love the neuroscience that shows that your brain actually responds to it and lights up in the prefrontal cortex.
Mhm.
Then I would say probably um, that last thing is just I'm just gonna say exercise and taking care of yourself. I'm 51, and I still exercise, and I'm very busy, and I have to be on the road a lot, and it's not easy, but exercising is a very important thing, and it's strength training for your muscles, which affects your brain, your longevity, but also cardio for your heart and your body systems and your endocrine system and hormones. You need those two things to optimize all of that. Now, some people would say, well, why didn't you say anything about nutrition? And here's my belief, and that is I go 80-20 with nutrition. Yes, I eat 20% of things I want to eat. I think you got to live in life a little bit, right? There are sometimes I'll go to 95.5 because I'm trying to get in shape or I'm trying to get my cholesterol down or something like that. But here's the thing about exercise and why I put it in front of, because the exercise can do so much to offset when you don't eat as well.
Right.
Okay. And so for me, that's why that would probably be the fourth, the nutrition and how you fuel your brain. But that's so important.
Wow. So I'll just have to caveat this with when we talk about our wellness piece, we have narrowed it down to fuel, which you just spoke about in terms of nutrition, rest and movement, FRM, from here to here, fuel, rest, movement, and you hit rest twice in terms of how you sleep and how you hit your well-being and the gratitude piece. And the only
Mhm.
parameters, it doesn't have to be complicated, that we put on them is you define the quality, the quantity, and the frequency. That's it. And how does it
Mhm.
fit into your life? Uh,
Yeah, I like that.
yeah.
I love that because everybody's different. And
Everybody
you're
else.
different in different times of life.
Right. And we were talking about this earlier in terms of having a framework, like let's just take all of this data and all the fun ways and different things that you can think about, with the magic mirror and Peloton and, are you trying out this new way of reducing body fat? You can take all of that. And if you have just the basics of fueling,
Yeah.
resting, and moving, and I love how you said for you, it's mostly about the sleep. Like, that that's the number one thing for you. And
Yeah.
I would have to say that's the same for me, but it's different for different people. But you hit
Yeah.
all three of them
Yeah.
across. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. So
Fun stuff.
I know this has been such a rich conversation.
Yeah.
The way that you have framed neuroadaptive leadership, and for everybody on this call, if you are outside of the inner circle, we're going to give you a URL where you can get a copy of this and get in more depth, and maybe even reach out to Jason directly if you'd like to connect with him.
Yeah.
These are practical tools to, as you said, to stay clear and calm in the middle of the chaos, in the middle of the VUCA.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, Tracy, I thank you for having me here with you, and I love what you're doing. That's why I wanted to be on this with you because I love how you're serving people. I love the energy that you bring, and I know these principles that you bring to people are making a big, huge impact. So
Thank
keep
you.
it up.
Thank you. I totally appreciate that. And to just close this up, I really appreciate that. Is next month we're going to be joined by Catherine Meese, who is the co-author of The Human Margin. Jason talked a lot about trust. We didn't go too deeply into it, but that's what we're talking about. And her work on trust and why trust is one of the most important drivers of resiliency and performance will be the perfect follow-up to adapting our leadership to disruption. And that'll help us explore how trust can continue to support and create the margin we need to lead well. So
Yeah.
until then, go forth and create a healthy day. Thanks a lot, you guys. All right. So that's the end of the recording officially. And I'm just going to stop the recording.